It's 1:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, March the 23rd, 2021, here at the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center. We want to welcome you. We want to say a special welcome to Highland Meadows, Adele Turner, Marino Steen, Marcellus Steen, and Walnut Hill, all of the Dallas Independent School District. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you enjoy, but most of all, we hope that your students learn something. Teachers, if you're watching, you have not signed up, please do so. Go to www.tiny.cc/EEC, register and sign up, please. Today, we're going to do basic needs of plants. During this virtual field trip, students will differentiate between living and non-living things based upon whether they have basic needs and produce offspring, and examine evidence that plants have basic needs such as air, water, nutrients, sunlight, and space. Mr. Monroe will tell you all about living things, while Ms. Fuller will tell you about non-living things. Ms. Nash will give you the basic needs of plants, and Ms. Ramirez will cover reproduction. You cannot talk to us verbally during this program, but you can go to www.tiny.cc/EEC /question/answer and ask a question. We'll try our best to answer them. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Mr. Monroe is going to tell you all about living things.
Good afternoon, students. My name is Mr. Monroe, and we're going to be looking at the characteristics of what we call living things. And as we start talking about those characteristics, I want you all to realize something. I'm going to use this globe, which is a replica of our planet Earth. And if we were all out in space today looking back at this planet that we live on, it would look much like this replica that I'm holding in my hand. And we know that the colors that are on this globe represent very special places where certain conditions exist that supports life on our planet. In fact, out of all the planets in our solar system, the planet Earth has perfect conditions for life. It's just the right distance from the sun, and we have lots of water, and that is very important to life. And so our planet is abundant with living things. Not only living things, but living things that are depending on non-living things. And so the characteristics that I'm going to be discussing with you and we're going to investigate, those are things that we can observe about certain things that will tell us that they are living. For example, I have a rock here. You look at this rock, you can tell that it is non-living. It's not alive, is it? How about this? We know that in this flask, there is water. And is it alive? I want you to think about that. Okay? Do we observe it being a living thing? We're going to go over those characteristics that make or gives us the idea that something is alive and that it is living. You know, students, two main things that we really tend to want to observe or want something to show us that will help us determine whether something is living. And that's whether the object is moving. Well, we saw the water moving a little bit, didn't we? We also saw the rock being very still. And that kind of indicated that maybe they weren't living because there weren't other characteristics there. But listen, also living things that we observe, we like to see them grow. So that's another characteristic that sometimes we will use to determine whether something is living. But let me share this with you. As far as movement, we see cars moving up and down the street. Does that mean that that car is alive and that it's a living thing? No. How about a fire? When a fire gets started, maybe in a fireplace, or somebody's burning trash or something, the more it burns, the more it grows, the bigger it gets. Does it mean that that fire is alive? Most likely not. When we talk about characteristics of living things, there are quite a few. First of all, we have living things all around us, especially on our planet. Some are in the air, some are on the ground, some are in the water. We also have non-living things that are all around us also. So, it's sometimes confusing trying to determine what's living and what's not. I'm going to start out by showing you a couple of plants and we'll talk about them. We know that plants basically are living organisms. Now, one key characteristic of living things is that living things are made up of the basic unit of life. And that basic unit, we call it a cell. Now, some living things don't have very many cells to make them up. Some only have one. They're single cell organisms that are considered to be living. Let me get this plant out. This is a multicell, meaning that it has lots of cells, and these cells make up different types of tissue that make up different organs that become part of systems that help that living thing go through what we call life processes. Now, this is a corn plant. Now, this is a survivor. Now, it survived the extreme cold temperatures that we had not too long ago. I had it in a little greenhouse. I'm surprised that it survived. It is considered to be alive. It fits a lot of the characteristics that we use to describe living things. First of all, of course, we don't see any movement, do we? So sometimes those characteristics are not evident in what we're trying to decide whether it's living or non-living, right? Well, the other thing is respiration, the ability to get energy from food. Now, we know that this plant is just not going to come up out of the soil and be trying to run down and chase some food to eat, right? Doesn't have a mouth. And so this plant is going to stand in one place, is going to take in sunlight from the sun. It's going to take a little water from precipitation or rain like we got last night. And then it's going to take something out of the air called carbon dioxide, and it's going to go through the process of making its own food so that it can turn that food into energy to help it grow and to help it go through life processes, okay? So indeed, this plant is alive. Now, one of the other characteristics that this plant has, it has sensitivity. If it didn't have sensitivity, then we would not see these burn or these black spots on the plant, simply because it was exposed to a change in its surroundings in the form of freezing cold temperatures, which almost caused this plant to die. Now, living organisms, there's a science word we use to describe them. We call them biotic. If you hear that word biotic, that means it's alive. It's a living organism. Even if this plant should die and no longer be alive, it still would be considered to be biotic. It wouldn't be alive, but it's still, its history, its origin was from something alive, a living organism. So that, in a sense, describes how this plant would be considered because of its characteristics. Now, if you were with us today, we would be taking a hike into the Post Oak Preserve, and there's a lot of trees, a lot of plants. Some of them are little, some of them are medium height, some of them are taller than I am. And then we have giant trees over there that are way up in the sky that provide a lot of shade when their leaves are out, and we call that the canopy layer. Now, students, those plants and trees over there, they are considered to be biotic. They are living organisms. Now, there are other living things that live there also that pick up the characteristics of being alive and living. I've got an animal right here I want to show you. And if we were walking on in the Post Oak Preserve and walking down the trail, my eyes would be scanning, trying to find a little fellow or a little girl like this. This is Teresa, the box turtle. Now, Teresa is alive. We can tell she's alive. She's got movement, right? She also has the characteristic of going out and looking for food, which she will eat, and she'll go through what we call respiration, changing that food into energy so that she can move around, and she's going to grow a little bit. That's characteristics of something alive. And she is sensitive to environmental changes. She has a sensitivity because guess what? During the winter months, Teresa actually would start trying to find some type of shelter, probably in the ground, where she would go into a deep sleep that we call hibernating or hibernation. So she does make some changes because of her sensitivity to the environment around her, okay? So that's an animal that we might find in the forest. And the plant life that we might find in the forest probably wouldn't be a corn plant, but most likely a post oak tree or some type of oak tree, and a variety of shrubs and a variety of grasses that grow there. So that is Teresa, the box turtle. She is alive. What about in a watery environment? Are there plants that grow in that type of environment? Well, in our ponds, we don't have a lot of water plants that fit the category of being truly alive, but we do have one that's very important to that pond that we have behind the center. And I went out the other day and I collected some. This is an example of a plant that grows in our pond, just like trees and other plants grow in our forests. Now, this is considered to be one of the earliest forms of plant life on our planet. It is called green algae. Algae is very important to that pond simply because it is a plant. It's green in color, so it goes through the same processes of making its own food that the corn plant does through a process called photosynthesis. So it is a living organism. It also will go through reproduction. Okay, that's another key. Just like the turtle that I showed you, she will lay eggs to reproduce. The corn plant eventually would grow seeds so that those seeds would make new plants. So another characteristic that living things have is that they have the ability to reproduce the same kind of organism that they are, okay? Algae does do a lot of growing. Algae does reproduce, okay? It may reproduce in a different sense, but it does go through all the characteristics that living things go through. Now, what about an animal that might live in the pond and might use this algae to its benefit? How about old Hoppy here? Hoppy is an American bullfrog. Can you guys see Hoppy? Now, he's green, isn't he? Does that mean that he makes his own food? No, no. Hoppy is an animal. And so basically what he has to do, he has to go out and catch his own food. And he loves to eat bugs and insects, okay? Now, he does go through he has the other characteristics of a living thing. If I was to let go of him now, you would definitely know that he would have movement because he'd be hopping all over the place. The other thing is, he's sensitive also to environmental changes around him. He would probably go into hibernation if he was out during the time that we had that extreme cold temperatures. And Hoppy, this is a male, but the female would reproduce by laying eggs. And the first stage after the eggs is something that we call a tadpole. So it goes through all those, it has all the characteristics of a living organism. So it is alive. Now, if Hoppy should die, would he still be biotic or a living thing? He wouldn't be alive, but he still would be considered to be biotic because his history came from being alive, a living thing. Now, students, hopefully I've been able to help you understand the characteristics of something that we consider to be a living thing. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman. And if any of you have any questions, maybe he can answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. And yes, there was a student that wants a definition of living things. Mr. Monroe covered all these things, but the student wants to hear it in one little small paragraph or sentence. The term living thing refers to things that are now or once were alive. Mr. Monroe just covered that. A non-living thing is anything that has never been alive. Okay. In order for something to be classified as living, it must grow and develop, use energy, reproduce, and Mr. Monroe covered this, be made of cells and respond to its environment and adapt. Now I got that. That's according to sciencez.com off the internet. And now we're going to hear Ms. Fuller tell us about non-living things.
Hello, boys and girls. My name is Mrs. Fuller. This is my lab assistant. Her name is Spring. She's a ball python. She's getting real thrilled there. I'm going to let you see her sweet little face and sticking her tongue out, trying to figure out who all these people are. Well, she's a living thing. She has cells. She has DNA. She moves. She can reproduce. She can lay eggs and have new ball pythons. She can respire, carry out respiration. She can convert food into energy, grow. So she fulfills all those living things. Now I'm going to talk to you about non-living things, things that don't do those activities of living things. Let me put Spring down. And let me share my screen with you, and we're going to look at some non-living things that are in the ecosystem. So, present and non-living things in the ecosystem. What factors in an ecosystem are non-living, don't carry out the life processes that you just heard from Mr. Monroe, and then from Dr. Gorman, and then from me. So let's look. Now, can you name one non-living factor in an ecosystem? If you said the sun, you would be right, because it is non-living, it's not alive, and has never been alive. It gives us light and heat. Plants need light to carry out photosynthesis. We need light and heat to be alive. If it wasn't for the sun, there would be no life on Earth, but it's not living itself. It's a star. It's important for life, but it's not living. So that's a non-living thing. Non-living things are said to be abiotic. The moon is non-living, but it helps living organisms. Now, we don't get light from the moon that comes from the moon. The light we see from the moon is reflected light from the sun. So when the sun light hits the moon, it bounces off and we can see the surface of the moon. But it's the moon's gravity that is so important for us because it causes the tides. The tides are very important for ocean organisms and other organisms that don't even live in the ocean. The moon cannot have babies, doesn't carry out respiration, doesn't eat food. It moves in that it's revolving and rotating around the earth. It does that at the same time, so we say it has a synchronous rotation, but that's not because it's alive, it's because of the motion of the solar system. Wind is not living, non-living, abiotic. It's not alive, it's never been alive. It's caused by the uneven heating of the earth by the sun. Wind has never been alive. We can't even see the wind, but we can feel it on our face and our skin. And we can see the results of the wind as it goes by us. When it picks up leaves and they moves them around, we know the wind is doing that. Look at the windmill there in the picture. We have a windmill here. When you come to see us, hopefully next year, you can see our windmill. Our windmill is the old-fashioned kind. It's circular. It has blades. The blades catch the wind, which turns it, turns a rotor, which turns a generator, which helps it pump water from deep in the earth. And water is not alive. Water is non-living, not alive now and never been alive, but it's very important for us. A lot of our body is composed of water. We couldn't have life here on Earth if we didn't have water. 71% of the planet is covered in water. Water doesn't have babies, it doesn't eat food, it doesn't respire, but it's non-living, it's not alive. Rocks and sand are non-living, they're not alive, they've never been alive. And when the rock breaks, it forms sediment. Sediment is little broken pieces of rock. Sand is a type of sediment. Sand is sand size. If you've ever been to the ocean, to the beach, or you've been to the to desert, or if you've ever played in a sandbox, like in preschool, all those things are not alive. They're non-living. Are they important? Yes, they're very important, but they're not alive. Air is non-living. The atmosphere is the layer of air around our Earth. We need air in order to live. Both plants and animals need air in order to carry out their life processes, but it's not alive. Doesn't have babies, doesn't have cells, doesn't have DNA, doesn't respire, doesn't eat, doesn't carry out any of the life processes that we associate with biotic things. Temperature and humidity are non-living factors in an ecosystem. Temperature is a measure of how hot or cold it is. Humidity is a measure of the water vapor in the air, the moisture in the air. Temperature can't have babies and neither can humidity. They can't eat food, they can't carry out respiration, they can't move, they can't do anything that a living thing can do. They're just simply part of the weather patterns. Now, let's ask us this question from the very beginning. The first thing we talked about was the sun. Now you tell me, is the sun alive? Is it living or is it non-living? Well, let's see if we can figure that out. Let's ask these questions. Does the sun have babies? No. Does the sun have DNA in cells? No. Does the sun eat food? No. Does it carry out respiration? No. If these answers are no, then the sun is non-living. Okay, well, let's get out of this and I'm going to show you one more thing. So let's look at this. This is a very pretty rock. It's called quartz crystal. Isn't that beautiful? It took it a very, very, very long time to form. Sometimes when people talk about crystals, they'll say, well, the crystal was growing in the lab or the crystal was growing in the crust of the earth. It doesn't grow like living things. It doesn't grow by cells multiplying. What they mean is it's increasing in size because more minerals have been added. So when you hear someone say the crystal grew, that doesn't mean the crystal is alive. It's just the way they're applying the English language to the phenomenon. And finally, this is water. It's from a Texas aquifer from Navasota, Texas. It's very useful. I drink a lot of water. I bet you do too. All living things need water, but it's not alive. Even though it helps us be alive, it's not alive. If you have any other questions about non-living things, Dr. Gorman will be more than happy to answer those for you.
Yes, Ms. Fuller, thank you. Same student asked the same question. Give us a good definition of non-living things. All right, non-living things are inanimate objects or forces with the ability to influence, shape, alter a habitat, and impact its life. Some examples of non-living things include rocks, water, weather, climate, and natural events such as rock falls or earthquakes. And this was according to VARSHA on the internet. That's what there was. Now, Ms. Nash is going to tell you about the basic needs of plants.
Hello, welcome to my classroom. Today we're talking about plants, and plants are so amazing. And this time of year is a great time to go out and start observing plants and see what you can discover and observe. So it's spring. So I went outside and I found all these little flowers just growing right outside. So beautiful. They're making flowers, the bees are coming, they're going to make seeds, and with their seeds, they can make more plants. Okay, so you heard the other people talking about reproduction. That means that they're going to have babies, and plants, most plants have seeds to make new plants. Okay, so fun thing to look at and observe all those bees and other things, getting nectar and pollinating the plants. So plants have basic needs just like we do. They need three things, just three things. They need sun, they need air, and they need water. Now, most plants that we see around us here are growing in soil. So most of our plants do need soil, but in the most basic form. So those plants that grow in the water, there's no soil there. Okay, they're floating around. So three things: sun, air, and water. That's all they need. And then they can make their own food. It's amazing. It's amazing. So let's think about how they get those things. So the leaves of the plant are getting sunlight. Okay, sunlight hits them. Okay, and then they also are taking in through tiny holes that they have. They've got tiny holes that open and close, and they, like the way we breathe, they don't have lungs, but they have these little holes that open and close, and they take in air, and they use the carbon dioxide from the air, and then they give off oxygen, okay, as a byproduct. And if you look at the leaf, you can see those lines. Those are called veins. So we have veins in our body too, right? Do you know what's in our veins? That's right, blood. But plants don't have blood, but these veins move the water around through the whole plant and out to the leaf, okay, so they can grow. Now, where do they get that water? They get that water from their roots. And I went out in my yard on Sunday and I started pulling out some things, pretty much weeds in my yard. And I pulled this little thing out, and you can see those roots there. Okay, and it's a fun thing to find a weed that no one cares about. And you can pull it out and then look at those roots, examine them with a hand lens. It's really interesting because they get tinier and tinier the way the veins do. Okay, and they're getting water and they're sucking up the water like in a straw, like you would drink with a straw. They suck up that water and it goes all the way out to the leaves. Now this one you can see doesn't look very happy anymore, does it? Because it's wilting. Because I dug it up on Sunday and today Tuesday. And since it's no longer in the soil, it's drying out and wilting. So it needs those roots in the soil or in the water to get the water. And another one that I pulled up, same little plant, you can see how those roots in this one are really hanging on to that soil, okay? They're really hanging on, they're all in that soil, and they're hanging on tight. And this one still looks okay. And then this one I potted up, okay? So I took it, I dug it up, and I put it in a pot, and I put soil all around, and I put water. So this plant should be okay, because it's gonna get everything it needs. Okay? Sun, it's got air all around, can get water, because this plant, its roots are in the soil. So let's stand up real quick, and take a little break, a little standing up break. Okay, you want to stand up? Kind of hard to do this, you know, on TV here or whatever we are, computer. Okay, so now, so we're plant, stand up tall. Okay. Now to reach all the way down to the ground to your feet. Imagine your feet are those roots that are going into the ground. Ready? Go down and suck up that water. And it goes up through the stem and it goes out to the leaves. Okay. And the leaves are going to reach up to the sun and then they're going to take in the air. Okay. So the plant can grow. Let's try it again. Suck up that water all the way out to the leaves, and the leaves are reaching for the sun and getting that air. Okay. So plants are really amazing. And a fun thing you can do in teachers, okay, if you're with DIC, you can get little peat pots from us and potting soil and seeds. And you can try to grow your own little plants in the classroom. Or at home, you can do that too. Okay. All you need is a little cup with holes in the bottom and some dirt and a little plant, and you can grow your own. And then you can draw me a picture of the things that the plant needs. So the roots getting the water, okay, it goes up to leaves. The leaves need sun. That's supposed to be air. And here's our rain coming out of our clouds to go down in the soil, to be sucked up by the roots. And that's all they need. And they can grow. The great thing about plants is that they don't run away. So if I go out and I want to look at birds, I go out, maybe I'll see a bird, but maybe not. But if I go out to look at my favorite tree, it's going to be there for a long time if we take care of it. So plants are a really interesting thing to study and learn about and observe and draw some pictures. So enjoy plants. And if you have any questions, Dr. Gorman will be glad to answer.
Yes, Ms. Nash, we definitely did have a question. Thank you so much for that interesting program. The student asked, can plants grow in the North Pole? And the answer is yes. Arctic plants, this came from the nationalgeographic.com. Arctic plants, approximately 1,700 species of plants live on the Arctic tundra, including flowering plants, dwarf shrubs, herbs, grasses, mosses, and lichens. The tundra is characterized by permafrost, a layer of soil and partially decomposed organic matter that is frozen year-round. Yet there's 1,700 different kinds of plants living in that very inhospitable surroundings. Thank you again, Ms. Nash. And now we're going to let Ms. Ramirez tell us about reproduction.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about a special word, and that is reproduction. So y'all learned about the characteristics of living things in a previous segment. So one of those characteristics of living things is that living things can reproduce. So think about what that means to reproduce. But before we talk about that science word reproduction or reproduce, I have a couple of living organisms that I want to show you guys. The first living animal that I want to show you guys is a pet rabbit. Her name is Mochi, so I'm going to go and pull her out. And just to give you guys another movement break while I'm trying to pull this rabbit out, if you would like, you can take a quick moment to stand. You can put on your bunny ears and you can do 5 bunny hops to keep you busy while I try and pull out this rabbit. Okay, so this is the rabbit. Her name is Mochi, and she is a living thing. So you learned about living things earlier. What are some ways that we can tell that Mochi is a living thing? So think about, what does she need since she's a living thing, and how can we tell that she's alive? So since I'm able to hold her, I know that she's alive because I can actually feel her breathing. If you look at her little nose over here, you can see it's twitching, so she's smelling. She's also breathing through her nose. She's a living thing, so she needs food to eat. She needs water to drink. So she does have needs since she's a living thing. And something special about her, since she is a living thing, she has the ability to reproduce or have baby rabbits someday. So that's Mochi. You guys can say bye to Mochi. I have another animal I'm going to show you guys. This is Pepper. Pepper is a blue silky chicken. So the rabbit was an animal called a mammal because the rabbit had hair or fur. Pepper, on the other hand, has feathers, and so we know that she is a bird. And we know that Pepper is a living thing because she needs food, she eats, she drinks. She can also reproduce. So if she wanted, or if she could, sometimes she actually lays eggs. So she does have the ability to reproduce or have young and offspring. So that's Pepper, the chicken. So I'm going to go ahead and put her up. Now we're going to go back to that special science word, reproduction. So we're going to do a quick little PowerPoint to understand what that word means. So let me start our screen share and then we'll look at some pictures. So again, we're going to be learning about reproduction. And by the end of this segment, you guys should be able to answer these two questions. The first question is, do non-living things reproduce? The second question is, you should be able to tell your teacher 3 examples of living things that reproduce. So keep those 2 questions in mind as we go through the presentation today. So reproduction is super simple. All that word means is that living things have the ability to produce babies or offspring. So take a look at these pictures here. We have the adult animal, we have the mom cow and a baby calf. We have the mom dog and the baby puppy. We have the pig and the baby piglet. We have the deer and the baby fawn. So again, reproduction just means the ability to have babies or offspring. But animals aren't the only things that can reproduce. Trees and plants can reproduce too, because again, they are a living thing. So plants and trees can grow and reproduce offspring too. So for example, especially during the fall time and even now, you can probably still see acorns lying around on the ground. Those acorns are actually seeds. So if you plant them, they will grow and turn into an adult tree. That adult tree will then produce more seeds, and then the whole life cycle will continue again. So an acorn is just a seed. And again, we know that seeds can turn into other plants and trees. So plants and animals reproduce. They can make more of themselves. So we know that living things reproduce, and we know that they can create offspring, and offspring again are just new living things that look like those adults. Now, if we take a look at our little picture here, we have living and non-living things. So my question for you guys is take a look at those non-living things. There's a picture of a rock and a table and a car. Do you think those non-living things can reproduce babies or offspring? So hopefully you guys said no. So non-living things cannot grow, they cannot reproduce and have babies or offspring. So please remember that. So again, today in this section, we are focusing on the living things that can reproduce and create those babies and offspring. So here's a quick little video. We saw Pepper the chicken. Here's a quick little video that shows how the chicken changes as it grows. So I'm gonna play the little video. You'll see the egg. There's a baby chicken side, and it's slowly gonna start pecking its way with its strong beak to break out of that egg. So it's hatching. I'm gonna fast forward it just a little bit so you can see more of the video. But eventually that cute little baby chick is going to hatch out. And do you think that baby chick is gonna look like that forever throughout its life? So hopefully you said no. Eventually that baby chick, once it meets its needs, it gets its food and water and proper care, it will eventually grow and turn into an adult chicken. So we call that a life cycle. It's how an animal or plant changes as it grows. And I'll stop that video there. And just on a side note, on your own time, see if you can name some other animals that lay eggs. So we already talked about a chicken, but can you guys think of other animals that lay eggs too? in our next little video, or we have some pictures of Pepper the chicken, who you saw earlier. We have a picture of Pepper when she was a baby chick. And then we have some examples of some eggs. So Pepper did change as she grew up. And again, Pepper's an adult chicken now. So she could reproduce and have other offspring. So let's take a look at what we see. We have the egg, we have the baby chick, and then we have the adult chicken. And if we look at our little arrows here, the chick hatches out of the egg. Given enough food and proper care, that baby chick can grow into an adult chicken. And then that adult chicken can mate and reproduce and start the whole cycle again and lay eggs to have more offspring. So we know that adult plants and animals can reproduce offspring. Now, not every animal lays eggs. Some animals can give a live birth. So let's look at an example with our rabbit. Remember Mochi the rabbit? So let's take a look at what the rabbit looks like when it's a baby. So that's the little rabbit nest. The mom rabbit makes a nest using her fur. And you can see those little baby rabbits, they have no hair. So when they're babies, they don't really have a lot of fur on them. They're rather pink and tiny. They're about the size of my thumb. They look kind of ugly to me because they don't have that fur on them. But as they get older, they will get cuter. We call the baby rabbits a kit or a kitten. I know it sounds kind of weird because we think of a cat, but that's just what they call a baby rabbit. And you can see as that baby rabbit starts to grow, it gets bigger. It starts to grow more hair or fur. Look how its body is changing. Its ears are getting longer. Its body is getting bigger. Its feet are getting bigger. And eventually these baby rabbits, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, will start to increase in size. So that's why it's important that animals meet their needs, that they get enough food and water to help them grow. And then as we continue through, eventually those cute little baby rabbits will start to look even cuter as they get older and bigger. And once they become an adult, they could potentially have baby rabbits of their own. So that's an example of an animal that gives live wild cottontail rabbits. They were found as babies. So what you see here, we have them as two little babies here. They were so tiny you could fit them in your hand. And then as they started to grow, they got bigger and bigger. And once they were big enough, we released them back into the wild. And then here's a little video clip just so that you guys understand that it's not just animals that grow and reproduce, it's also plants. So again, here's that little acorn. If you go outside and find yourself a good acorn that hasn't been eaten on, you can actually plant it and it might grow into a baby oak tree. Eventually, many, many years later, that little baby oak tree will turn into one of those giant mature trees that you guys see outside. So I'm going to fast forward it just a little bit so you can see some more and how it grows or germinates. So the science word for when a plant sprouts, it's called germinate. So you can see how it pushes its way through the soil. And then we have the start of a baby tree called a sapling. So that's pretty cool because you can find acorns all over the place. And this is just a quick little song about acorns turning into a giant tree. I'll read it really quickly. So oak tree, big and tall. How you start as acorn small. Plant the acorn in the wood. Time and care the acorn should. Grow up strong for all to see. From acorn small to tall oak tree. And there's lots of different kinds of acorns that you guys can find too. So my at-home challenge for you guys, again, keep in mind that living things grow and reproduce. So see if you can find a seed or an acorn maybe to grow. You can also regrow vegetables from scraps. So remember, vegetables come from plants as well. So those plants are living things. So sometimes if you're done with your lettuce that you have at home or a carrot, if you chop off a piece of it and place it in water like you see in this picture, you can start it to regrow. You can also do the same thing with potatoes. I buy a lot of potatoes, but I don't eat them fast enough. And sometimes they will actually start to sprout on their own. So you can just chop those potatoes up, put them outside in some dirt and plant them. And that is what you see in this picture here. It's a potato tower. And then my reflection question for you guys. Again, we as humans are living things. We can grow and reproduce. So think about, how do you look like your parents or your relatives? And think about, how has your appearance changed as you have grown? So something fun that you can do at school is see if you can bring pictures of yourself when you were a baby and compare it to how you look now, or compare it to how you look compared to your other family members. So you can see how I and my brother have changed as we've grown up. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our video. And that's all I have for you guys today on reproduction. We're going to give it back to Dr. Gorman, and he's going to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez. The question is, do all snakes lay eggs? And the answer is no. About 70% of snakes have their babies by laying eggs. The other 30% have live babies. And most of those are in the northern colder climates. I guess the eggs would not survive there, so the babies are just born alive. All right, thank you again, Mr. Ramirez. Now I'm going to share my screen. During this virtual field trip, students differentiated between living and non-living things based upon whether they have basic needs and produce offspring, and examined evidence that plants have basic needs such as air, water, nutrients, sunlight, and space. Mr. Monroe told you about living things. Ms. Fuller covered non-living things. Ms. Nash made the basic needs of plants. Have a little trouble there. And Ms. Ramirez covered reproduction. Thank you so much for joining us. And teachers, how did we do? If you would, go to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback, fill out a short form and send it in to us. Again, thank you. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Most importantly, students and teachers, I hope you have a great rest of your life.